Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start the second video on the June 23 paper 1-1, and this will be question 23 to question 40. Question 23. The blood in the renal vein has a different composition to the blood in the renal artery. How is the blood in the renal vein different? You see, what we have to understand is how the kidney functions. Now, just a brief revision of what is happening in the kidney. Now, the kidney contains the nephrons, and the basic unit of the kidney is called the nephron. And there are millions of nephrons in the kidney, and this is what actually they've shown you here is they have magnified that and shown it to you. Now, the renal artery carries blood into the kidney. The renal artery is going to be very loaded with urea. It's got glucose, it's got oxygen. But when the renal vein comes out, which is this one, the renal vein coming out and filter blood coming out, this will have less urea. Why will it have less urea? Because some urea is not filtered out, because most of the urea is going to enter the ureter and is going to be passed out as urine. But there is still less urea. Of course, there will be more carbon dioxide. Why will there be more carbon dioxide? Because the cells of the kidney are respiring and producing carbon dioxide. There will be less oxygen. Why will there be less oxygen? Because the cells of the kidneys are living and they're using up the oxygen. There will be less glucose. Because glucose and oxygen are used by respirating cells, which a lot of active transport takes place in the kidneys. So basically, you've got to first know how the kidney functions, and then you can do this MCQ. So the blood in the renal vein has a different composition of blood in the renal artery. How is the blood in the renal vein different? C. More carbon dioxide, less urea, less water. So why is A wrong? Less carbon dioxide? No, there'll be more carbon dioxide. That is why, because the cells of the kidney are respiring, so there'll be more carbon dioxide as compared to the renal artery. Renal artery is bringing oxygenated blood. Renal vein is carrying deoxygenated blood. Why would there be blood in the renal vein will have less oxygen, more urea? No, that is wrong. More oxygen. No, renal vein can't have more oxygen. Less urea, less water is correct, but the more oxygen is wrong, because you see, renal artery will have more oxygen. Renal vein will have less oxygen. Any organ is supplied by an artery. The artery always has more oxygen in it. The vein which is going out of it, carrying the blood away from it, always has to have less oxygen in it. This one has to have more glucose. Any organ of the body. This has to have less glucose. This has to have more carbon dioxide. Any vein. This is a vein coming out of an organ, and this is an artery going into an organ. So every organ has an artery and a vein. Artery going into it and a vein coming out of it. Now coming to question number 24. The diagram shows a reflex arc. Now you can see X is a sensory neuron. Why? Because the cell body of the sensory neuron is in the dorsal root ganglion. So what we have to understand is that this is the receptor here, and then this is the sensory neuron, which is going to go here, 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 up to here. And then you have the relay neuron, which is this one here, here. This one is the relay neuron, and then this green one is the motor neuron, which goes out and supplies the muscle wherever it is going to be talking about. A person was involved in an accident and their arm was injured. The sensory neuron at X, so that means the sensory neuron at X there is cut. So we get a cut here, and this now there's no connection between the sensory neuron. There is a gap. So it says a person involved in an accident and the arm was injured. The sensory neuron at X were cut. Which statement describes what happens if this person touches a hot object with their finger? The person is not able to feel their finger touching the hot object. Why? Because the sensory neuron is cut. How is it going to feel anything? The sensory neuron carries the impulse to the spinal cord, and that information is carried to the brain. So the person is not able to feel their finger touching the object, but is able to move their finger away. Why? Because the motor neuron is intact. This motor neuron is intact. So he can probably move his finger away because the motor neuron is intact. So that is why the answer is A. But why is B wrong? The person is not able to feel their finger touching the hot object or move their finger away. No, they can move the finger away because the motor neuron is intact. Why is C incorrect? The person can feel the heat stimulus but is not able to move their finger. No, he's not even going to feel anything because the sensory neuron which carries that impulse of that heat is not going to be working. So this is again wrong. Then the receptor cells in the person's fingers are not stimulated by the heat. No, they are stimulated by the heat, but the nerve carrying the impulse is cut, so it will not carry. So the receptor is intact. The receptor is here somewhere in the finger. The receptors are not stimulated. They are stimulated, but that impulse going into the in the sensory neuron is not going to go to the spinal cord, and then it's not going to go to the brain. Question number 25. The diameter of a person's pupil is measured as the light intensity is varied. During which time period does the light intensity increase the fastest? You see, if the light intensity increases, what is going to happen to the pupil size? The diameter of the pupil is going to decrease. So, okay, let's see where are the decreases. In A, there is not a decrease, there is an increase. In B, there is a decrease. This is a decrease in B. In C, there is an increase. In D, there is a decrease. Now, what was the question? During which time period does the light intensity increase the fastest? So there has to be a sharp decrease. In this, there is a gradual decrease. In this is a sharp decrease. So that is why the answer is D. Understand the question. The diameter of a pupil. So the diameter of the pupil is this. The diameter of the pupil now is even less smaller. During which time intensity increases. So when the light intensity increases, the diameter is going to decrease. The diameter is decreasing in this also. It is decreasing in D also. It is decreasing in B also and D also. But in D, there is a sharp decrease. In B, it is a gradual decrease. These are the wordings that we use very often in A-level biology a lot. On a warm sunny day, a swimmer climbs out of a pool and sits on the edge to dry. Party time. After a few minutes, the swimmer's skin begins to feel cold. What has caused this to happen? Body temperature drops until it reaches air temperature. Muscles and other organs stop producing heat from respiration. Sunlight causes the hypothalamus to begin processes that increase heat loss. Water on the skin absorbs heat from the body and evaporates. Latent heat of vaporization. Answer is D. You see, body temperature drops. Body temperature cannot drop. We remain at 37 degrees Celsius at all times, whether you're in a hot room or a cold room. Muscles and other organs stop producing heat from respiration. Why? Why would that happen? Your heart muscle keeps on working. Your kidneys keep on working. Your intercostal keep on working even when you're sleeping. Sunlight causes the hypothalamus to begin process. How is the sunlight and the hypothalamus correlated? And that's a weird possible answer. I mean, somebody really messed up in biology would get that to be the answer. Question number 27. A genetic disorder causes too much insulin to be secreted. What is the effect of the secretion of too much insulin? First of all, let's say what does insulin do? Insulin is produced when you eat a lot of sugary foods and your blood glucose level rises. So then it carries away the glucose. So the glucose is converted to glycogen. It removes the glucose from the blood and it is converted to glycogen. Now, what is the effect of the secretion of too much insulin? Blood glucose concentration is low because the glucose is being converted to glycogen at all times. So that is why the answer is A. Now, the question is, why is B wrong? Glucose can be detected in the urine. Why would glucose be detected in the urine? Glucose is only detected in the urine when the blood glucose level is very high, no insulin is being produced. Glycogen in the liver is low. Why? Because too much of insulin is being produced, so more glucose is being converted to glycogen all the time. That is why your blood glucose is very low. Less glucose is converted to glycogen. No, the insulin results in the conversion of glucose to glycogen. So if you knew insulin story, then you could probably do this question. Then coming to question number 28, auxin is a chemical produced by plants. What is the role of auxin? It stimulates cells in the plant shoot to elongate. Yeah, that's the answer. It stimulates meiotic cell division. No, that is nothing to do with meiosis. Meiosis only occurs in sexual reproduction in reproductive parts of the plants. It stimulates the development of the branching root system. No. It stimulates the process of seed germination. No, it doesn't do that. Question number 29. The diagram shows cell X, which contains 24 chromosomes, is divided by mitosis to produce cells Y and Z. So cell X has 24 chromosomes, and then cell Y will also have 24, and cell Z will also have 24. Why? Because this is mitosis. Mitosis results in genetically identical cells having the same chromosome number. So the answer is B. How many chromosome cell does the cell Z contain? What is a feature of asexual reproduction in a plant? Question number 30. What is a feature of asexual reproduction in a plant? All the offspring will grow to an identical height. Any seeds produced will be identical. Asexual reproduction doesn't have seeds. The plants need to carry out the process of meiosis, doesn't take place in asexual reproduction. So the answer D is correct. The offsprings will all have identical genotypes. Yeah, they will have. This wrong? Why is A wrong? You see, it depends upon how much nitrates and phosphates and sulfates are in the soil. That will determine the height. The height is determined, yes, genetically too, but because of the other features. If there's no light, it's growing in the shade, how will it grow to the same height? So the offsprings will have what is a feature of asexual reproduction in a plant. So that is why the answer to 30 is D. Then the diagram shows, question number 31, the diagram shows the parts of a flower. Which labeled part will develop into a seed following fertilization? Now you know it's the stigma, style, and the ovary. So D is the stigma, A is the anthers, which is the male part. B is the ovule, and C is the ovary. Now the ovules become the seeds. So question number 31 is B is the answer. Then coming to question number 32, the diagram shows the 28 days of a typical menstrual cycle. The letters around the outside indicate different points in the cycle. Which row shows the points in the cycle? We are supposed to know the maximum thickness of the uterus lining. You're supposed to know when menstruation takes place, and you're supposed to know when ovulation takes place. So everybody knows ovulation takes place on day 14, which is X. So that's why the answer can only be either A or C. But then let's see which one of these is correct. So the question is that maximum thickness of the lining would be at Z, maximum thickness, and menstruation is going to be at U. So that is why the answer is going to be C. Maximum thickness of the lining is, why is it Z? It's this point. Because this is the phase in which now ovulation has occurred and becomes vascular and spongy, but the maximum thickness is at this point, Z. Because at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is where the menstrual cycle starts. And day 14 is the time when ovulation takes place. Now, question 33, the diagram shows the arrangement of blood vessels in the uterus wall and placenta of a pregnant woman. What will increase in concentration in the blood as it flows from 1 to 2? So 1 is coming in, and then all the waste is going into from the uterine side, from the fetal side, and then is going out of the uterus. So what we have to understand is what is going to be increase in concentration. Why you have to remember is that the fetal cells are respiring, using up oxygen and producing carbon dioxide. So there's going to be more carbon dioxide entering the blood vessel, which is leaving the uterine wall. This is the uterine wall. And then they have the space filled with mother's blood, and then they have baby's blood and the umbilical cord, and then the developing baby. It's wrong in the way they're not supposed to use the word baby, it's a fetus. So glucose would also be less because the glucose from the mother's blood has been taken by the fetal cells, and the oxygen would also be less. So what will increase in concentration in the blood as it flows from 1 to 2? So it will be the carbon dioxide which increases in concentration, because the fetal cells are using up the glucose and oxygen, respiring and producing carbon dioxide, and so carbon dioxide is going to increase in this vessel which is leaving the uterus. Question number 34. Some lizards in a population had longer leg bones than others. They were able to climb better than the lizards with shorter legs, so they were able to escape from the predators on the ground. Over time, lizards with shorter legs died, so that all the lizards in the population now have longer legs. Which processes cause this change within the lizard population? Well, it can't be extinction, and that's just rubbish. It has to be natural selection. Conservation, what is there in conservation? How are we helping them to be conserved? No. Artificial selection means something which you do for human benefit. Lizards are of no human benefit. And I'm scared of lizards, by the way. Question number 35. The genotype for the height of an organism is written as capital T and small t. So that means there is a dominant allele and there's a recessive allele. So the people with the height of an organism is capital T or small t must be tall people, or they could be capital T, and small t would be people who would be shorter in height. I mean, this is what we are assuming. Which conclusions may be drawn? The allele for height has at least two different genes. No, a gene has two different alleles. There are at least two different alleles of gene for height. So that is the correct answer. There are at least two different alleles, alternative forms of a gene. There are two different genes for height, each having a single allele. No, that's wrong. There is one allele for height with two different forms. No, it has to be one gene with two different alleles. So this is more of an English question, checking how well your English is. The diagram shows apparatus set up to produce alcohol by fermentation. We have yeast cells in glucose solution here, and then we have a layer of oil, and then we have lime water, where all this is going to go and is going to enter the bubble, the air into that, or whatever gas is being produced. What is the purpose of the layer of oil? To keep the alcohol in the solution? No. To prevent aerobic respiration. Why? Because it is apparatus used to produce alcohol, and alcohol cannot be produced by aerobic respiration. So this is the correct answer. To produce carbon dioxide? No. What would we use carbon dioxide for? We want alcohol to be produced to provide nutrients for the yeast. Now, how can a layer of oil provide nutrients for the yeast? So it's a very simple question, but I mean, it's really confusing if you're going to be really confused by it. Then it says question number 37. The diagram shows a pyramid of biomass. Which percentage of biomass is passed from the primary consumer? Primary consumer, lettuce, is the producer. This is the plant. Primary consumer is the caterpillar. To the secondary consumer. The secondary consumer is the robin, which is 120 grams. So which percentage of biomass is passed from the primary consumer to the secondary consumer? So 120 out of 600. So that is why the answer is C. 120 over 600 into 100 is equal to 20%. Primary consumer to secondary consumer. Please understand this question. Then coming to question number 38. Now, whenever I teach you this, I always tell you this is a very simple way of doing this. The diagram shows part of the carbon cycle. Which row shows the correct labels for the numbered of boxes? Well, actually, I always say this is photosynthesis. Look at the arrow for photosynthesis. Now, it's coming out of here and it's going here. So 2 has to be plants. And this has to be air. Because there's a carbon cycle. So carbon dioxide in the air goes into plants. So plants has to be 2. Then feeding. This has to be animals. And 4 then of course is decomposition, so dead matter. So decomposers respire it and the carbon dioxide is returned to the atmosphere. So which row shows the correct labels for the numbered of boxes? Yes, so 1 has to be the air, 2 has to be the plants, and then 3 has to be animals. So the answer is D. So this is the easiest way to do it. Decomposition will be decomposers. Respiration will, of course, the animals respire and produce carbon dioxide. So this will be animals' respiration producing carbon dioxide going back to the air. Now coming to question number 39. Which human activity is likely to contribute most to global warming? Now you know global warming is because of too much CO2 and methane. More the CO2, more the CO in the air, that is going to result in the heat rays being reflected back onto the earth and results in global warming. Now, that is all emissions from burning fossil fuel. So the answer to 39 is C. The others are all wrong. Non-biodegradable plastics in the ocean and pollution due to insecticides and water pollution by sewage. Then coming to the last question, question number 40. Drainage from fields where nitrogen-containing fertilizers have been spread can result in fish dying in rivers. Now, this is actually eutrophication. Which sequence of events describe what happens when fish die as a result of water pollution by nitrogen-containing fertilizer? So it's actually more growth of water plants. So if you look at it, it has to be between C and D. More growth of water plants, less plant decomposition by bacteria, more oxygen dissolved in water. No, that is not the case. Fish are dying because there's less oxygen. More growth of water plants, more plant decomposition by bacteria, less oxygen dissolved in the water, and that's when the fish start to die. So that is why the answer to 40 is D. So more nitrogen fertilizers means more nitrates and phosphates, so more plants grow rapidly. Algae forms a layer on the top. The algae dies, falls to the bottom of the pond. Bacteria decompose it, so the bacterial numbers increase. From 10 million, they go to 100 million bacteria. Bacteria respire, use up the oxygen of the water, and the fish start to die. So if you've seen my YouTube video on that, you'd probably be knowing these sequence and you would be able to do this MCQ. Okay, that completes this paper and best of luck and thank you very much.